Okay, let me just double check that we're live. I believe we are. We are live. All right, we're good.
Awesome, great. Well, my name is James Pepper. I'm the chair of the Vermont Cannabis Control Board. Today is March 21st, 2022. It's 11 a.m. and I call this meeting to order. I guess first things first, we are streaming on YouTube. And so anyone that wants to kind of go back and watch our meetings kind of instantaneously, you can do that now, which is great. Thank you, Nelly. Just a quick update on pre-qualification. So we opened our pre-qualification application window last Wednesday. As of this morning, we have a total of 253 pre-qualification applications that have been submitted. And we haven't started to review them individually. However, as soon as we do, and certainly when we start issuing approvals, the plan is to have a tracker on our website that will display the number and the type of each pre-qualification application that we have approved, which I think will be kind of helpful as business information for other folks that are seeking licenses. So we'll be doing that as soon as we kind of catch our breaths and start to review these. I want to remind everyone that pre-qualification is a voluntary process. It is not required to get an operational license. There are certainly some benefits both to the board and to the applicant, but there's also some downsides. Primarily that you'll have to get your fingerprints done twice. Pay a fee each time with those fingerprints. And also, there's the non-refundable application fee for pre-qualification, and that's non-refundable even if you are a social equity applicant or even if you end up being disqualified. On payment, on the fee, our staff is working on setting up the payment portal through our website and a process for receiving checks and things of that nature. As soon as we're ready to accept fees and we have the authority to do so, the staff will notify all of the pre-qualified applicants directly and kind of walk you through the payment process. Also, just, once you've been pre-qualified, there's no need to update your pre-qualification application as you add more principals or financiers or owners to your leadership team. Any new additions should really come through your final licensing process. So I know that folks continue to have a lot of questions about pre-qualification. The best place to start with any questions is to look at our website. We've really been trying to kind of modify the information that's on there in response to people's questions. So go to ccb.vermont.gov/pre-qualify. And if you don't see your answer there, you can email the board at ccb.info@vermont.gov. That's kind of the next good step to take. And then, of course, we do have a phone number here. You can always call 802-828-1010. And then it's option 0 for the adult rec market. And you can always leave a message and we'll try our best to get back to you promptly. I guess just a reminder also that we have filed rules 2, 3, and 4 as emergency rules last week, meaning that they are currently in effect. We've spoken to the staff of the dispensaries. They all kind of understand what the rules do. We're working on guidance for patients and caregivers and the dispensaries that explains kind of the program as it exists under Rule 3 and the new statutes. And that guidance will be posted to our website by the end of the week. Finally, we have a social equity and economic empowerment networking event on this Thursday, March 24th from 5 to 7 p.m. We're still operating under the kind of updated public meeting laws, the temporary public meeting laws. So this is going to be an all remote meeting, no in-person attendance. The link to RSVP is available on our website. And Brent, I was wondering maybe if you wanted to just briefly describe what the event agenda is going to look like.
Yep, sure. So we're going to be doing, David and I will be there, and we will be doing a high-level review of rules 1 and 2. And the purpose will really be to assist people in figuring out what they need to have ready for their full license application. So the focus is going to be on what the license application will require, and we'll also go over what the pre-qualification application requires too, in case people are interested in that. That will be followed by a Q&A session on the applications, both pre-qualification and full license application. And we'll set out some notes at the beginning of the session, but there will be some limits on what questions we can answer, since we really can't offer an opinion on whether a person or an entity will be granted a license by the board. So we're not going to be able to answer specific questions about individual or individual business scenarios, but we will be answering sort of general questions about how to interpret the rules and what the application for a license will require.
Great. So again, that's this Thursday, March 24th from 5 to 7 p.m. And again, we don't record those. We don't post them. These are not open meetings. There isn't a quorum of the board there. And really the idea behind that is to encourage participation, encourage open dialogue, encourage open communication. So please, try and join if you can. The link to RSVP is on our website. Other than that, we just need to approve the minutes from March 14th, our last meeting. Kyle and Julie, have you had a chance to review those?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. Well, I would take a motion to approve.
Move to approve the minutes for the last meeting.
Seconded. All right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great. Well, why don't we turn to the agenda? Today, we've all been kind of looking at some of our packaging rules, and we've been developing guidance on them. I have some slides. Julie, I don't know if you have anything you wanted to prepare. I'm happy to kind of take your lead if you want to go first or second or third. Do you have any preference?
I don't have a preference, and I do have slides.
I have some slides too.
Well, why don't I get started? I've got some slides just on the material side of thing, what the packaging materials need to be. And so why don't I get started? And you and Kyle can fight it out for who goes next. Okay, packaging guidance. So this is just a recap of what we said about packaging in Rule 2.2.9. So the following requirements apply to all cannabis and cannabis product packaging. So this is really about those kind of cross-references. You are really about labeling, but also clearly identifying the package contents, be free from false or misleading statements, not using objects that essentially appeal to minors or people under the age of 21. And then this second part is the kind of operative part of my slides, is that packaging that is intended for consumer purchase at a retail location shall be reusable and shall not be plastic. So I've got some kind of guidance on that piece of things. So we don't have a definition of packaging in our rules. I thought it'd be helpful only because, we now are starting to see we're starting to identify a difference between packaging that's meant for consumer sale versus intra-supply chain transferring of products between licensees. So I just wanted to make that clear in our guidance, that packaging really means, when we talk about packaging and non-plastic, reusable, we're really talking about anything that's intended for consumer sale. And it really doesn't mean the kind of shipping containers or vacuum sealed kind of plastic bags that licensees may use within the supply chain. So in general, I mean, I think it's important that packages are designed to protect the product from contamination and shouldn't expose the cannabis or cannabis products to toxics or harmful substances. And that the packaging not appeal to people under the age of 21. I know this is directly in our rules, but I think it's good to kind of, if we have a standalone guidance document, just to remind people of these things. So the language under B here that uses objects such as toys, inflatable movie characters, cartoon characters, etc., that is straight out of our rules. You know, there's a document that a group, like a cannabis association, put together. It involved kind of some of our consultants as well. That has model definitions. There is a kind of model definition of a cartoon character that we could look at. I didn't include it here, but you know, I think that's where things get a little bit fuzzy on this, considering a lot of what we see in the craft beer industry does actually use what could be characterized as cartoon characters. But I don't know if we want to get that descriptive or not here in our guidance. Julie, do you have any thoughts on that, or Kyle?
I do. I think the part of this that I covered was kind of like that look, like what is a cartoon and what isn't.
Okay.
So we can talk about it more, although I would like to know, I didn't find the cartoon character definition, so that would be probably a good thing to continue to talk about. I think the way I framed it was things that are generally marketed to children or generally marketed to youth under the age of 21.
Well, when we transition to your slides, Julie, I'll pull up the kind of model definition that this organization put forward.
Yeah, that'd be good.
See if it, yeah. So I'm envisioning a product registration process. We do have a product registration fee. And so I think the kind of product registration process will give us the opportunity to review whether something is in compliance with our guidance and our rules on packaging. So just, you know, this basic guidance just says, you know, if you're going to develop a package or a label, you know, it has to go through a CCB product registration process. One thing that, you know, a lot of other adult use states do, including Oregon and Massachusetts, is they maintain a list on their websites of all packaging that's been approved. And so, you know, if you don't want to kind of have any questions about whether your packaging is okay or not, you can go to this list and see all the packaging that the board has approved. And you can use that, you know, if we apply a certain waiver, and I have a waiver provision later on, if we grant a waiver for a product packaging that includes a de minimis amount of plastic, for instance, that packaging will be approved for the entire industry. So I think that you know, that's the kind of vision that I'm laying out here. It's kind of central to this. So just a reminder that there is, under current law, require that all packaging be opaque and child resistant. You know, I think H548, which passed the House last week, eliminates the need for cannabis, which would include the seeds and immature plants, from being in opaque child resistant packaging. So I think in our guidance, this, you know, we should be clear about that, but, you know, obviously it's dependent on whether 548 actually passes. So that first line is kind of up in the air currently, but certainly for cannabis products, they must be opaque and in child-resistant packaging. And then, another kind of model, guidance or rule is that if a edible, for instance, contains multiple servings, that the child-resistant packaging must be capable of being resealed, and the child resistance must be kind of sustainable at least as many times as the number of units in that product. So again, if you had a tincture that had, 100 servings in it or something, or 10, 15 servings, the lid would have to be child resistant for at least 10 uses. And then here's just some, again, from that model document, those model definitions, some definitions of opaque. The child resistant packaging actually just comes from our statute. That was defined in Act 164. So, but opaque just means that the contents can't be seen in an unopened container, and that, it could be just the specific properties of the container, or it could be put a sticker over it. And then child-resistant packaging. This very closely mirrors the federal definition of child-resistant packaging, but it's difficult, not impossible, but difficult for a child under 5, whereas it's not, people above that can still, but kind of not difficult for normal adults to use properly. So getting to the prohibition on plastic and non-reusable packaging. So just reiterating that packaging that is intended for consumer purchase at a retail location shall be reusable and shall not be plastic. That's in our rules, 2.2.9. I just threw in a quick definition of reusable. Reusable means packaging that's capable of repeated recovery, inspection, sanitation, repair if necessary, and reuse in the supply chain. I guess I should get rid of reissue for reuse. Yep. Plastic, that's just the definition of plastic from our rules, from Rule 2. And then I think it's going to be important for us to kind of push people in certain directions here as to kind of reusable, non-plastic. So, glass, tin, cardboard, and bamboo. We could say also, just as a catch-all, anything that's been approved pursuant to our product registration process or packaging registration process. And then glass, tin, cardboard, and bamboo, just by the way, are the most commonly non-plastic. If you look on Massachusetts or Oregon, those are the kind of materials that are most commonly used as alternatives to plastic. So just recognizing that, plastic in some form might be necessary for certain reasons. We have kind of talked about having a case-by-case waiver process. So this is and this is obviously up for debate. This is something that we need to figure out and kind of understand the kind of actual demands of the market. But this is my first attempt at this. So a licensee may seek a waiver to the plastic prohibition if the licensee can demonstrate hardship in securing non-plastic packaging. And then I list the 3 reasons why that we would accept as a reasonable kind of hardship. So one is the unavailability of non-plastic packaging, which I have heard certain products just, they require a certain amount of plastic and there's no viable alternatives currently. 2 would be an inability to achieve child resistance without some amount of plastic. And then 3rd would be it's necessary to preserve shelf life stability, prevent contamination of cannabis or cannabis products, and then finally avoid exposure of cannabis and cannabis products to toxic or harmful substances. So through the product registration process, we would expect licensees to kind of submit a waiver petition essentially for their specific packaging. And I'll come back to this slide in a second, but just moving on, because the waiver petition would also need to include a packaging alternative that uses de minimis plastic. And de minimis plastic, for the purposes of this kind of waiver, is only the amount of plastic that's reasonably needed to overcome the hardship that they've identified through their kind of initial waiver. And then, in addition, the licensee should propose packaging alternatives that prioritize certain types of plastic. First, plant-based recyclable plastic or reclaimed plastic. And finally, the licensee must submit a plan for complying with the non-plastic reusable packaging requirements. So how are you going to try and phase out this plastic? How are you going to try and come into compliance with Rule 2.2.9?
You want me to quickly just talk about the conundrum of bioplastics and recyclable bioplastics versus compostable bioplastics?
Yeah, that packaging alternatives that prioritize certain types of plastic, I don't know the right. I used to work with bioplastics in DC, so I'm a little bit ahead of the curve when it comes to understanding nuance, because I think a lot of folks have come to us, or have, at least, or packagers in this industry have started moving towards a bio-based alternative as it relates to plastic usage, recognizing that, a lot of folks want to see plastic move out of the industry, but it's understanding where the industry currently is. I think a problem unique to Vermont, it may exist elsewhere, is we don't currently have any composters in state willing to accept bioplastics that are compostable. Essentially, when we think of bioplastics, people automatically think biodegradable and compostable. That's not always the case. There's kind of two routes that bioplastics take in mimicking traditional petroleum-based polymers. There's the PET route, which is recyclable plastic. Coca-Cola had a plant bottle out for a number of years. You might have seen it. It was the green Coca-Cola label. That was recyclable plastic. It was bio PET. So it was not compostable under industrial composting, standards. You still had to recycle it through a recycler. PLA, which is a very common polymer, does compost under a specific set of conditions at an industrial level. Composters in this state have just decided that the infrastructure with which they're currently operating, it really messes up what they're trying to accomplish while composting. And you can kind of equate it to, if anybody has any small engines at their house, whether it's a snowblower or a rototiller or a marine engine, if you put high ethanol fuel into those, it really gunks up the system. And think about it in the same type of context. We just, the industry isn't there to accept, high amounts of bio-based PLA or something along those lines, because it kind of messes up everything else they're trying to accomplish from a more organic matter perspective. So, in thinking about the non-plastic alternatives and alternatives to to petroleum-based plastics, when we were having these conversations, I think it would be great if we could move in a certain direction in relation to hemp plastic or bioplastic, but recognizing if we set people up to buy those products and put them into a stream of commerce and they just get landfilled anyways, then what was really the point? So I don't necessarily know what kind of bio-PET, bio-based recyclable products there are for this industry. I haven't done a wide net search. I'm sure that they're out there. I know a lot of hemp plastics are the PLA route. And so they would just end up getting landfilled if we use them in this context anyways. So I just want folks to recognize that, we know about a lot of things, not everything about this, but when we get the question on bio-based packaging, it's because other folks in the state won't accept those at their compost facilities. And that, I think the last one sunsetted their ability to take plastics on December 30 or bioplastics on December 31st. So that's why recyclable plant-based products are in here and not, the way we more naturally think about bioproducts, which is in a biodegradable fashion. Does that make sense? It does. So is plant-based the right terminology to use?
Yeah. there's a lot of corn-based and other kind of more commodity crop-oriented PET types of plastic that service markets generally speaking. I just don't know from a cannabis industry perspective, are there bio companies making PET for packaging for cannabis? That I can't answer that question, but there are major companies out there making PET recyclable bioplastics. And then there's other ones making compostable ones that are more of the PLA route.
And then just one other question, like, because I obviously have been going back and forth in my head whether to include some terminology around biodegradable and or compostable. And I hear what you're saying, but I'm curious if those compostable or biodegradable products end up in the landfill anyway. Is there any benefit to having something that's biodegradable in the landfill versus something that's non-biodegradable?
No, yeah, and I understand that question, and I think it's more nuanced than that, and I think we'd have to talk to folks that operate those businesses here, because I don't know what type of landfill setup they have, because, you know, biodegradable or compostable bioplastics, they're not like, you know, a banana peel that you throw out and it degrades under the set of weather circumstances that we, you know, have in our natural environment. It needs to be under very specific conditions, whether it's aerobic or anaerobic digestion, that really suck the oxygen out of what's going on and allow it to break down in a different way. And I just don't know how we're set up from a landfilling perspective, recognizing I think we have one landfill in the state. If they are set up in a way for those products, even if they do end up in the landfill, to break down as we think organic matter does break down. And this is the push and pull between whether bioplastics are really worth it to some environmentalists or not. You know what I mean?
So that to me seems like the right language then. Prioritize plant-based recyclable or reclaimed plastic.
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know, there's a lot of, I know that there's companies in this industry that are using reclaimed ocean plastic to formulate, you know, containers, whatever you want to call it, for this industry. I think if a retailer is looking to do that, you know, that's different than a single-use petroleum-based plastic, and we can provide special accommodation or through the waiver process or whatever the case may be, because there is a lot of companies moving in that direction, in addition to the bio-based plastic direction.
That's not included here though, Pepper, is it? Reclaimed ocean plastic would not, that's not included in your.
I say packaging alternatives that prioritize the plant-based recyclable or reclaimed plastic.
So yeah, I mean, it's still plastic. You potentially would have to seek a waiver, and you know, I know for a fact there's companies out there that are trying to pivot in this direction and not least looking at, you know, the single-use variety. But then again, it's like, what's your definition of single-use? And we'll get to this in some of my slides when it comes to, you know, the collection and reuse of consumer packaging waste. But is that single-use plastic at the point, thinking about the life of that plastic, or single-use in the context of its use in this industry? And so it gets a little convoluted and wonky, but you know, it's again still a step in the right direction, I think.
Julie, do you have any thoughts about this slide?
I don't.
And
I
what
had
about-
the same
Oh, yeah.
question as you about that. If it goes to a landfill, does it still break down? So thank you for answering, Kyle.
The answer is, it depends. That's my lawyer answer for the day.
So then this is the other kind of like the big one, which is just the three reasons why you could seek a waiver.
Yeah.
We feel like these are sufficient to kind of cover the potential need.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, from my perspective, you know, I think we're a little bit ahead of the curve from an industry perspective on trying to move plastics out of the retailer supply chain. And I think two of those major reasons are shelf life stability and child resistant packaging. And, you know, depending on what happens at the legislature for flower, you know, it kind of alleviates some of my concerns around child resistant packaging and being able to reuse materials that, it's harder to guarantee that CR requirement after its first life. And to an extent, it does the same thing for the shelf life stability. I think that's really where, plastic, for better or worse, does a really good job of maintaining moisture content, and making sure that product is a marketable product throughout its actual, life as a cannabis product, and it doesn't degrade because of the packaging itself.
And do you think, I know we had this conversation, but that ability for retailers to package for consumers, I think
that helps. I think that helps there. I think we might see, some lids that have that seal on it, or some films that go over the entire packaging. We might get waivers, depending on the product for that, and we can have that conversation when the time comes. But, or there's cardboard packaging for flower and for vape carts and stuff that have a plastic push button,
right?
That's that acts as the child resistant thing. And, those are for me, would be a de minimis amount of plastic. So it's just kind of recognizing, I think people and regulators and industry professionals that I've talked to about this issue recognize what we're trying to do and think it's a cool direction to move in. But we need to recognize where the industry currently is, and packagers are not going to, redo their entire supply chains to meet a market as small as Vermont's. But, it's these cool ideas happen in small state laboratories and, spread once it's successful, hopefully.
Great. Well, I think this is a process that will work. And again, I think the idea is, if someone goes through this waiver provision and we have an approved kind of package, that package could be used by other people that want to use it. So, all right. Well, that's all that I had on packaging. Having seen these slides, Julie or Kyle, do you think your slides should come next?
I have collection and reuse of consumer packaging waste, Julie. So if you think that's a natural segue, I can go.
That seems like the direction we're going. Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, this is one of the schemes that we put into our regulations, and the first two slides are kind of what is mentioned in our regulations, and we're piggybacking off of predominantly what Colorado is attempting to do. And in my conversations with the regulators in Colorado, they don't have a lot of guidance out on this because it's fairly new for them as well, and trying to figure out certain things. But and we did leave out some stuff that Colorado has, like a locked container, in the facility. We just thought that was a little much. I don't think people will be, trying to hit the bargain bin and reaching in and trying to take out plastics or containers that have a very, dusting of cannabis product inside them. Maybe they had better reasons, but who knows? So this is what's in our regulations. Retail cannabis establishments may collect, reuse, recycle cannabis packaging waste. Only retail cannabis establishments may collect consumer packaging waste for reuse and recycling. They need to collect consumer packaging waste from consumers or from other licensees. They should be located in the cannabis establishment, such they are subject to the same security measures as the rest of the establishment. Reasonably supervised by a licensee to ensure any consumer packaging waste is only removed by a licensee. The receptacles need to be labeled, clearly stating that it's consumer packaging waste. And, you can include additional waste if you so want to. A little bit more about what was in our rules. This is where I start to kind of conceptualize, what requirements apply for actually trying to do this. Obviously, the major one that comes to mind is sanitizing and disinfecting. So who can sanitize? I'm proposing that the retail cannabis establishment can set SOPs up to do this themselves, or hire a third party to do so. And, you know, I think with that, we would like to see certain information be made available to us or other state officials upon request or inspection, no matter if you're looking to stand up and do this in-house, contracts and receipts related to collection and a third party helping you out here. But I know Colorado allows for third parties to do, you know, this to service this industry. And I think it would be proper for us to do as well. I think really here, good business records and SOPs are what's really going to help drive this. I think this needs to be standardized across retailers and their employees, making sure that they're doing this in a correct manner. And what I've really done and kind of looked through is the produce safety rule at the Agency of Agriculture, how you clean certain receptacles as it relates to an ag product. And I've perused the health department's website for similar language. It's a little harder to find on the health website because there's other topics that dominate, given the state of the world, that website. But this is a starting point. We can kind of further define this moving forward. I think within your SOPs, they need to be posted clear nearby for employees that are looking to do this. Restock cleaning supplies like brushes, detergents, and sanitizers that are labeled for use. Dedicated locations for clean and dirty items. A cleaning log might be helpful as well. And I'm thinking these SOPs don't need to be, we don't need to have these on file per se, but I think in the course of inspection, or if we do receive a complaint, these need to be kept and given to us on request, or the health department upon request. That's why I put other state officials in here, in case that there is a problem through the course of this part of the program. So child resistant containers, again,
Kyle, can I ask a quick question about the SOPs? And let me think about how to frame this. So, if we had to stop sale on something, how would we know if it's from the content of the package or because the package wasn't clean? Like if there was an issue, and this, I don't know that this is a guidance question or something that we just need to think about for a future conversation, but how would we know if there was an issue with a product in the package or if there's the package itself what hadn't been properly cleaned?
I don't know if I know the answer to that question off the top of my head. I think whenever we get a compliance and enforcement staff in-house, I'm hopeful that, when we do get those questions, we can develop our own SOPs to start eliminating, factors that might go into understanding what really is the root of the problem. I don't know if that's an answer that's helpful right now, but
no, well, it was just something that came up as you were in my mind as you were talking, and that we probably need to think about.
It could be the product, it could be the packaging itself, it could be insufficient cleaning of that package. And
Julie, one thing when Kyle talks about the third party, when I was looking at this question, I did notice there are a number of third party companies, not necessarily in Vermont, that specialize in collecting and sanitizing cannabis consumer waste for reuse. And so they certainly have their kind of, SOPs worked out. And maybe it's either we rely on those companies and how they do it, or we rely on their procedures in our guidance for how to do this.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I think retailers that want to do this, we're not reinventing the wheel. There is, opportunities to connect with those third parties. They've likely, unless they have a presence in Vermont, you can't ship your waste out of state. But I'd imagine there are going to be some ancillary businesses that might pop up to service this part of the market. Or if you bring it in-house, just leaning on their expertise and how they operate to kind of ensure that this, doesn't become an issue like you mentioned, Julie.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I don't have all the answers right now. We'll get them all eventually. and this is just more, visual inspection, especially with the child-resistant packaging requirements for cannabis products. But the container visual inspection requirement rings true for others as well. It should not be brittle or have chips, cracks, or other imperfections that could compromise CR or shelf life stability, or or pose a threat to public harm. If depending on certain things happening, if a mason jar is allowed, for cannabis flower and it has a crack in it and you can cut yourself on that, seems like that one should just be retired instead of reused, just a little bit of common sense. But, I think one of the challenges that I know Colorado and packagers have encountered with these take back programs, if you clean the way that these are cleaned and disinfected, a lot of packagers will not certify that the CR requirement will hold beyond the first use or the first retail use of these packaging. So there's got to be some type of standard operating procedures for identifying certain things, depending on if your packager, your relationship with that packager as a retailer, they might not certify that it's CR beyond the first use, and how do we dispose of certain items that might not be able to qualify moving forward. And then I would submit that A&R DEC, I know, is working on lithium-ion battery waste issues and rules and guidance for those batteries as they become more prevalent in our everyday life. So, if you have a vape cartridge with a battery attached to it, you can't resell those batteries. That falls outside of our jurisdiction, and those need to be separated in the process. As of right now, that's really all I've got.
That's great. No, and one thing that this whole conversation kind of brings to mind is we recognize that this is a voluntary program that we're talking about. This kind of retailers being able to collect, sanitize, and reuse. I'm wondering if we could tie this into our positive impact criteria. That this is one of those things. If you do this, if you kind of,
I think it would be easy to, because we have the environmental,
right, exactly,
criteria already. And quite honestly, between our views on plastic here, potential child resistance, packaging changing, and the take back scheme, this could be one of the most forward thinking retailer packaging regimes in the country, if not the most forward thinking one.
Yeah, I've noticed in California where they have programs like this. Some retailers, they're not required to, but they're going, as part of their image and part of their commitment to environmental sustainability, have you bring back your packaging, you can have a $1 discount or something, some sort of discount for the next purchase. That I think a plan like that could easily fit into our positive impact criteria requirements.
Yeah, I think retailers will get creative here, and that's really where good innovation meets, where forward-thinking regulation can really meet business from an innovation perspective and really see market dynamics start to change. That being said, I think we're all, again, cognizant that we're a little bit ahead of where the industry is, but that's why we have waiver provisions to kind of meet people where things are now, hoping that we can get to a certain place in the future. At least that's my perspective.
This is great. Any questions, Julie?
No, this looks great, Kyle. Thank you.
Right.
Okay. So my piece of this was really around the consumer labeling and packaging, and it should be coming up.
We can see that.
Okay, perfect. So I don't need to go through the rule again. Thank you for Pepper for setting the table for us. And that I did, in the guidance that I started working on, I did break down what a false or misleading statement might include. And then also what, sort of the toys and cartoons might include. So for false or misleading statements, I said, physical or psychological effect that associates cannabis consumption with improving a lifestyle, hobby, or activity. So one couldn't say, on their packaging that if you use this product, you become better at, fill in the blank, particular activity or lifestyle. And that, promising something like that or promising a curative effect of the product would be a false or misleading statement. And then for the not using the objects that appeal to minors, I think I said, and we were talking about this before, Pepper, avoid images or language popular with youth under 21, such as cartoon catchphrases or general design that resembles characters popular with youth. We could also say, and then the next one talks about images of food, candy or other items that are commonly marketed to children. So that seemed pretty clear. What was the definition that you had, Pepper, for a cartoon character?
Yeah. Here, I'll pull it up if you don't mind. Should I just do that quickly?
Yep.
Okay.
There we go. Because I thought back to the last conversation that we had about this in November, and I do remember talking about, one of the local breweries and their can. And I suspect this will be a little bit subjective because some of it is cartoony, but not necessarily in a way that would appeal to children, right? So that is sort of a gray area.
So this is one that this is kind of a model definition that this group of industry experts came up with respect to cannabis. I'm not saying that this is the best definition. It's just there is a working group that specifically looked at this. And so again, it's kind of comically exaggerated features, attribution of human characteristics to animals, plants, or objects, and then the attribution of unnatural or extra human abilities, such as imperviousness to pain or injury, X-ray vision, high tunneling at high speeds, or transformation. I'm fine with however we land on this, honestly. It's, whether we need a definition of a cartoon or we kind of know it when we see it, I don't know if that, again, even with the definition, this is very subjective, comically exaggerated features. Well, that depends on that's in the eyes of the beholder. But anyway, I figured I just came across this. I thought it might be helpful for the conversation because, again, cartoon, yeah, like any Lawson's can looks a little cartoonish to me, but for any kind of alchemist can, so.
Right, but does that appeal to children is the question, right? So,
yeah.
I would say, the Alchemist can, the one I'm thinking of, it's a cartoon, but I think it would be scary to young children, right? You know what I mean?
It might appeal to some children.
It might.
Yeah.
Like Sid from Toy Story.
Yeah. And trying to kind of characterize as something that appeals to someone who's under 21 versus over 21 is very challenging.
Or 21 versus 5, right? So
right, exactly.
There's a huge, what's a cartoon that appeals to a 5-year-old or a 21-year-old? There's a huge array there.
Right.
So, yes, I agree.
Okay. Well, I just figured this is somewhat relevant. I'm not suggesting we adopt this, but figured I'd throw it up there for you to see.
Yeah. So, and I think we can work in some of those pieces to this. I think that would be helpful. So then sort of based on that conversation, I tried to find some things that we could put in guidance that were clearly unacceptable and some things that were clearly acceptable. So I think what's helpful to this conversation is, do we all agree on that? Given that this is so subjective and we're going to have to approve eventually advertising, I think we would probably agree that all of these on this slide are generally not acceptable. They definitely, there's one that sort of looks like a Disney Mickey, so that would definitely be advertised towards children. You know, there's one that sort of adopts another look of another candy that's typically advertised towards children. So I think, do you all agree that these are things that would be generally not acceptable based on our guidance and rules?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then I tried to find some that were acceptable, like not that we would necessarily use these specific images in our guidance, but I think all these would be acceptable. The one that I think is sort of like maybe on the line and sort of like what we're talking about with the beer cans is the Shipyard THC elixir. Like that's a little cartoony.
Watch out for Pumpkinhead.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to make it clear also that we're not allowed to have THC infused drinks. But
Yes,
I know
and
that this is just a model. Yeah.
That's not, there's no actual, that's not alcohol. It's only a THC elixir. So there's no alcohol in that particular item.
Yeah.
Although it is made by a brewer.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, for the most part, these look pretty standard.
It's a blurry line. It's, you know,
Right.
it's again, it's hard to set procedures necessarily in place. It's like, you know, you see it.
Yeah. So then if we all are comfortable with that, so I think I'll use some examples in the guidance based on that. And then just as a reminder, these are our warning labels and symbols. I think I tried to get these as pretty close to like actual size, so they'll look smaller to you all on the screen than they typically do. But based on what's written in our rules, this is pretty close to the size that we require. And then the other policy point that we probably should talk about is the warning labels. We've left a lot of flexibility in our rule in terms of how this could be affixed to a product. So in our guidance, I think we can say things like, you know, it could certainly be directly printed on the package or secured with a sticker. So I'm thinking of sometimes you get a something from the pharmacy where the sticker is almost like a tag on a package. So I think that could potentially be acceptable. Also like a peel away label, like you see with some things have, you know, you peel away the label and the warnings on the inside. And that we want to say that the warning label is clearly readable on the package somewhere, whether it's peeled away and you can clearly read it or affixed with a sticker and you can read it. Are you both comfortable with those as guidance for how folks can put the warning label on the packaging?
I'm fine with the sticker, but as far as the contains THC, can you go back one slide? Yeah, contains THC and not safe for kids. I don't think that can be obscured in any way. Yeah.
No, I
Like
no,
an
I
appeal
agree with.
away. Yeah.
Yep, this would just be this warning label. This longer, you know, it is not this section here. This warning label. These other things do have to be clearly placed on the packaging, where it can be seen when you pick the packaging up. In my opinion, I think that's kind of consistent with what we've talked about throughout. But it was just this larger warning label that I thought we could have some flexibility on.
Yeah, that's fine with me. Especially just recognizing that some packaging is going to be so small that the notion of trying to like put that warning label on it without having some sort of accommodation is going to be quite challenging.
Yeah. And then the last piece I'll just share with you is a guidance checklist. So this came out of the public health subcommittee from back in the fall when we were talking about the warning labels and symbols in general. And so this was kind of like the last piece that NACB shared with us. It doesn't, what they shared with us doesn't look exactly like this. I separated it out to kind of match our rules. And this is a draft. So there are probably some spelling errors in it, but it is a draft and we'll have a checklist in our guidance so that people can kind of go through and say, okay, I've met all these things before they submit anything.
Sounds good.
That was it for me.
That's great. All right. Well, I guess, just looking at the agenda, that's kind of the main item. We have public comment next. So I'm happy to open this up to public comment. Again, we will start as we usually do with people that join by the link. Please raise your virtual hand. We'll go in the order that you raise your hand, and then we will move to folks that joined on the phone. So Nellie, maybe you could help us out with the order.
Amelia is up first.
Hey, everybody. So, I do packaging design for a living. I do branding, I do marketing, all of that stuff. And I'm holding a bunch of concentrate jars right now that are childproof. They look like this. They're glass on the bottom, plastic on the top. You pinch here, and that's how they open. They have a plastic lid. So my thought, and I know a lot of growers that are using this exact concentrate jar right now. My thought there is maybe prohibiting plastic altogether right out the gate is putting the cart ahead of the horse. And while I want to, and I've obviously advocated for this already, while I want to see us go fully recyclable, compostable, sustainable packaging, I think at first if you give maybe a percentage of packaging that can be plastic, that we can then lower through the next 2 to 3 years. So this would be fine if you said that your packaging can't be more than 30% plastic. But if you're saying that none of this can be plastic, then every single person who's bought 5,000 of these in anticipation for the market, I know they shouldn't have done that because the packaging requirements haven't come out yet, but people are doing their best right now. The people that have bought 10,000 of these, it's going to waste now. I think that as far as, I've already said, as far as child-proof packaging goes, it's not accessible for people with disabilities. I know that you guys can't do much about needing child-proof packaging. I know it's in statute and you have to do it. It's not accessible to people with disabilities, to people with arthritis, to people with mobile disorders. And as far as, alternatives, sustainable alternatives that are also childproof, we're going to see a lot of the same packaging on shelves from different companies. And it's going to be hard to differentiate between each company's product if everybody's using the same 2 or 3 companies for their packaging. And then as far as the actual graphics are concerned, I would take a look at Burlington Beer Company and the cans that they put out, because I've got their website open right now and they have wizards, they have cartoon monkeys, they have cartoon clouds, they've got Petal Prophecy, which is this really pretty can that's purple and it's got all these cartoons. I think that, again, and I know that I say this a lot, and I'm sorry to beat a dead horse, but the CCB's job is not to parent children. And you can only do so much to keep cannabis out of the hands of kids. And as far as packaging goes, I agree. Don't use licensed cartoon characters, or licensed anything. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen, regardless of whether it's being advertised to children or not. But when you get down to, is this specific facet of the packaging design advertising to people over the age of 21, you are splitting so many hairs there. I think that there is a level of common sense that can be used here. And there's also a level of parental responsibility that the CCB should not be having to take on. It is not your responsibility to make sure that individual children are not getting into their parents' cannabis. It is parents' responsibilities to ensure that they are storing their cannabis in a way that the children can't get a hold of it. And that's really the biggest thing I wanted to say. I'm a graphic designer. So looking at the warning labels and looking at all of these requirements, damn, I would not want to be the person designing a lot of this packaging right now. And I know a lot of other graphic designers who specifically do cannabis packaging who are worried right now that they're going to have to turn their focus to other areas because of the restrictions that are going to be placed on them in terms of design. Yeah, so those are my two biggest things right now. I think that there is a way to slowly go into, you know, a sustainable, waste-free, plant-based packaging while also keeping in mind that a lot of people have started buying their packaging, because all of this is coming up really quick. Growers have not gotten a lot of final information, and so they're just doing the best they can right now so that when they can finally open up their businesses, they can compete with the dispensaries that have had the head start above them. I think that as far as design goes and what is or is not advertising to children, there's a level of common sense there. And I also think that there are other companies that are in the alcohol space that are not nearly as restrictive as a lot of what is being placed on cannabis is, specifically in Vermont. And just one last thing, and then I'll turn it over. In the warning label, we've got not safe or do not use if you are breastfeeding. And the science on that is still up in the air. And you all know Jessie Lynn. She just went to Israel to speak in an international conference about how cannabis is safe for breastfeeding and chest feeding parents. And internationally, I just can't see how we're putting warnings on this when the science isn't there to support them. The science isn't there to support a lot of the claims that we're making because this isn't federally funded. So we don't have federally funded studies, but we do have international studies that we can look to see whether or not the information that we're putting on these warning labels is actually factual. Yeah, so that's my rant. I'm sorry to take up so much time, but thank you for letting me speak.
Thanks, Amelia.
Ebo.
Good afternoon, everyone. Love the way things are going. I just wanted a few things on the recycled packaging, which I'm really excited to be able to do that. You know, I was planning on opening a dispensary, but it seems to me that it would make more sense for the manufacturers to somehow get that packaging back versus the retail stores, right? Like if I'm selling Mr. Z's flour, I think it would make sense for those jars to be able to go back to them somehow and then use them to repackage. I mean, unless I'm not understanding things correctly, we're not packaging stuff at the dispensary level anyway. So, you know, for us to have all these jars or whatever, which is pretty much the only thing you're going to be able to reuse, I would think, somehow that needs to be able to get back to the manufacturer so they can put their product back in it, I think would be smart, especially if people have like branded jars or whatever, you know, so it's really better for them to get them back than for me to get them back and try to figure out what to do with them. Also, the cartoon thing is crazy, right? Illustrated logos have been around forever. You know, I think not using cartoons, similar to what the last speaker was saying, that's a licensed cartoon or a kid's cartoon is great, but you know, let people represent their brand the way they want to represent it, and you know, however creative that may be or whatever, you know, it's just that gives you true brand identity, and I think that's really important for our space. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ebo.
Miguel Lopez.
Hey, good afternoon, CCB. I just had a quick question. Just doing the straight cultivating, I just was wondering, what am I required to, like if I wanted to package my flower into glass jars, take it to the retailer, and then just once he's done with that, then just pick them back up and kind of do the recycle program. How do I have to package it in order to get it to the retailer?
All right, thanks for the comment. Again, we don't generally answer questions directly during the public comment period, but we will note that question, and I think our guidance will be very clear on that.
Okay, no, thank you. I just had that's just my one concern, was just wondering how I need to prepare it, or what my options are, just so I can get it to the retailer.
Yeah, so again, I think packaging describes what's going to the consumer, not to other licensees. And so all of the restrictions that you're hearing about packaging really apply not to cultivators unless you're packaging direct for consumer sale.
Okay. Well, in that sense, then going with, like, I know that the Vermont Growers was, I think, bringing up about on the smallest tiers about them being able to do direct sales too. I know it's nothing in place, but how is that work? How is that going to hash out, I guess, to where can someone with like a tier 1, is there going to be anything in place where we can go directly sales direct to the consumer?
No.
Yeah. Thanks for the comment, and just stay tuned. Keep tuning in to our meetings, and if you have any direct questions like that, you can always email info.ccb. or at vermont.gov.
I think it's ccb.info.
ccb.info.
I always forget it though.
Perfect. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Tito.
Hi, everybody. Happy Monday. I want to say that I agree with Amelia. She made a ton of great points. Also, great point by Ebo there as well. Feels like, since the growers need to do the packaging anyway, unless they have a wholesale license, getting them the jars back seems like something we want to figure out. I like where Amelia was going too, with just like, picking somewhere to start, and then maybe making it a progressively better system as we go along as far as plastic goes. And on that note, I think making an exception from the beginning for the lid and the label seems to solve a lot of problems. So as long as the package itself isn't plastic, that seems to solve the childproof problem. As well as the possibility just to find this packaging, which clearly is going to be a challenge. So the lid and the label, if we can make an exception there, it feels like it would open up a lot of packaging to start off, and then maybe we can improve that over time. I definitely feel the same way as Evo with the logos too. And what Kyle was saying, it's kind of hard to define, but you know it when you see it. I feel like there's a ton of hand-drawn stuff that is definitely not appealing to kids. And lastly, I want to just talk, I know it's not today's subject, but I think the single biggest problem right now that's going to be holding up craft growers and possibly everyone really is just local zoning. I know through my journey through this process, local zoning has definitely seems like it's going to be the single thing that's going to slow me down the most. My local zoning board just doesn't really know anything of what's going on. Maybe some kind of more extensive reach out on behalf of the CCB to local zoning boards. It feels like a lot of them just want to really slow the process down, which clearly is going to be a serious problem if we want to have cannabis come October. So thank you all. I hope that you're having a great day.
Thanks, Tito.
Thayer. We have Thayer at Island Pond Cannabis.
You there?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Hi, we can hear you.
Hey, I lost you guys for a second. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry about that. It wasn't letting me unclick it. I just wanted to, thanks for everything you guys are doing, by the way. Really appreciate it. Just a couple things I wanted to mention that might or might not be helpful as I've been talking to all of my manufacturers in great depth. You have a broad blanket in speaking to, and if I'm getting something wrong that I haven't read correctly, I apologize in advance. So the caps that we are looking at are, you have this broad wording of plastic, and I'm not sure if that applies to as a blanket rule, like no plastic or recyclable plastic, because I've gone into great detail finding out what the plastic is made of and if it's recyclable. So I am just wondering if that's something that wants to be addressed, if you're going to be speaking to that based after this conversation with everyone. But the caps are PE and PP, and they are recyclable that we are doing. And also, I don't know if this is ever going to be an option. I know in the beginning there was discussion about whether or not the flour had to be in child-resistant packaging or not. And then this marries with the discussion of reusing packaging. So there's a company in Los Angeles called Rose Los Angeles, and just this past year, they started doing home compostable refill pouches. So it gets rid of single-use plastic. And I'm happy to email it over if anyone wants to see it or reach out. But basically, it's a brown paper packaging. It's not the most exciting packaging, but I do think it is interesting rather than creating more plastic top waste. But again, it's not the most beautiful thing, but I do think it's interesting. It's just not necessarily child-proof, and that would be for flour only. So they're just things I kind of wanted to throw out if that would have any wiggle room if you're really trying to be sustainable, how we can do that moving forward in a very environmental way. Because I do agree, it's the industry produces so much packaging and waste, and it's hard to get around it with the caps and everything. So just things to consider. That's about it, but thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Next, we have David Nathan.
Thank you very much. My name is David Nathan. I'm the founder of Doctors for Cannabis Regulation. I'm also the co-designer of the International Intoxicating Cannabinoid Product symbol. You folks, I had to miss the first few minutes because I was seeing a patient, so I may have missed your vote, but I believe you may have voted on rules 1 and 2, in which case you have adopted the IICPS using the colors red, white, and black. And if I'm correct on that, then I'd like to say thank you very much for adopting it. I'd also just like to add that, as you may know, the IICPS was designed in yellow and black. The idea being that it's a true caution sign and conforming with existing voluntary consensus standards. And as you may also know, the IICPS itself is now a consensus standard internationally through ASTM International, one of the main standards organizations. It's also been adopted by the state of Montana in yellow and black. The state of New Jersey has incorporated it in yellow and black. And the state of Alaska is now looking at a proposal to use the IICPS, and the only color they're considering is yellow and black. I understand that you guys wanted to have some color similarity to the states of Maine and Massachusetts, and that's why you chose those colors. And, I myself had kind of experimented with different colors early on before seeing that we really do need to go with consensus standards, because once cannabis is legalized at the federal level, the ASTM standard in yellow and black will be the federal symbol because of the National Technology Transfer and Advancement Act, NTTA, yes, that requires the government to use consensus standards where they exist. Something you should also know, other than the fact that eventually you're going to need to change the color to yellow and black, which will not go over well with industry if they're already telling you, giving you pushback about some of the things that might disrupt existing packaging inventories. Something else you should know is that one of those two states, and I can't tell you which one, but between Maine and Massachusetts, one of those states is now looking at changing their symbol to the IICPS. So if you think you're doing it to align with existing New England states, you might get left behind on that. And the other consideration is that there is now data showing the efficacy of the IICPS in actual consumer testing. And the yellow and black was thought to do well with showing caution. So I'm happy to share that information with you if that would be helpful. I imagine this is kind of a done deal, but I would suggest that you guys reconsider. And thank you for your time and your work.
Thank you, David.
Ron.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Sorry about that. If anyone can hear me right now, please let me know. I'm having slight issues. How about that? Is that better?
We can hear you, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, so this is Ronald Williams from Mr. Z Craft Cannabis. First, I want to say, really appreciate everyone's comments and all the work that you guys are doing. Especially appreciate Ebo and Amelia's comments. They, I think, really speak to, certain things that are very important as we move forward towards the, market open as it relates to design. So I do all of our design, and I'm working on sourcing all of our packaging, and it's really, really difficult with these parameters, even though I understand the intention of that. But for example, finding glass, opaque, child-resistant packaging, as far as I've seen, is near impossible. There's a lot of hemp plastic, post-consumer hemp plastic packaging that achieves both of those things. And I understand, what Kyle was saying about the current recycle infrastructure in the state, but I would just like, I guess, the state to reconsider that because, that's going to be a very difficult thing to source. And that might also create bottlenecks around that as a result, given how limited, that type of packaging is. And then also, one last thing related to the warning labels and such, it is very interesting to see constantly reprinted that it's not safe for children, for example, because again, that's not necessarily a scientific fact. So, a couple things to consider from the CCB perspective, because especially as, a cultivator of, 3 young men who've had to raise their money from friends and family exclusively, it's kind of hard to observe these things while also trying to build a business for the first time. So really appreciate everybody considering this, and thank you.
Thanks, Ron. So Sean?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of touch on the whole issue of packaging from a graphic standpoint and know it when you see it. It's essentially kind of turning into the FCC and George Carlin bit of the 7 dirty words. The FCC guidelines just say that a violation occurs if a broadcaster has violated the standards of the community. There's no list of words. It's just when someone happens to be offended and submits a complaint to the FCC. So either y'all would need to create a very exhaustive list of what graphics will be prohibited, be it color, font, or types of characters, or just drop the issue entirely, or that it would need to be updated or reviewed annually after a number of complaints have come in. But is that to that particular company? Is it towards that graphic style in general? And where do you all get tied up in that same kind of issue of the FCC of just being beholden to the standards of the community rather than an actual bullet point list of approved graphics and non-approved graphics? So I wish you luck with that. It's murky water.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for that. So anyone who's joined via phone, you can make a public comment. You hit *6 to unmute yourself.
Hello, my name's
Hi.
We have a couple of folks that have unmuted themselves. So I'll just kind of move us through that. Let's start with the phone number ending in 4334.
Thank you, Nelly. Hi, everybody. This is Ben Mervis. Am I coming through all right on the phone?
Yeah, we can hear you, Ben.
Great. Thank you. Kyle, I just wanted to acknowledge and appreciate something that you said about the fact that these packaging standards really have the potential to join some of the highest standards in the country, if not set them, coming from the Vermont public health world, where we also set some really incredible precedents and policies. It's just nice to see that continue with Vermonters and with Vermont Cannabis. And then to build on the comments from my peers, Ivo, Amelia, Ronald, I just wanted to talk about I wanted to draw the connection that I think a lot of what they're asking is that for this first year to 2 years, that we just see more qualifications added to the waiver list, essentially, whether it is that somebody has already made the investment or that something, I believe from what we've heard today, the waivers are going to be a case-by-case basis, and you seem to be very understanding to the multitude of reasons that someone might request one. But just, acknowledging that list, or maybe when we see if that will be written in the guidance, that would just be very helpful to see, the prevention of waste. That's something that happened in California with packaging, is that, in order to achieve even a sustainable packaging rate, you have to order such a large quantity. And so if something changes on packaging that affects that packaging that's already been purchased, that creates a problem. And then additionally, I'm not sure if this is already laid out in rule. I believe it is having to do with how products arrive at retailers from wholesalers, product manufacturers, that I believe it already has to be child resistant. But I just want to urge or publicly comment for all of our industry peers to really look at that and look at the fact that we're talking about reusable solutions here. And so if a manufacturer is able to recoup packaging from retailers, that may not just apply to the immediate packaging for the products, but it can also apply to child-resistant options. Another thing that we've seen in developed markets are exit bags that are reusable, so that essentially any product that's sold that's not in a child-resistant package immediately can then be placed inside of a child-resistant exit package. Things to look at, lots of examples to follow. And that's my comment. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ben.
All right, next we have the phone number ending in 7034.
Yes, hello everybody. My name's Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Hey, mostly I just want to reiterate what my fellow commenters have mentioned. Doing a quick search on a child proof, or is it a child resistant? They're advertised both ways. The majority of what I see, in fact, all of what I see, are a plastic of some kind. So I just want to reinforce the fact that maybe we need to pick a jumping off point that isn't so far out, and allow some of those packagings. Mason Tops is the one brand I was looking at. It's a child resistant cover that goes on a glass mason jar. Sounds like a no-brainer, but with a no plastics criteria, that's kind of a non-starter. So I'd like to think that we could re-look at that and make that happen. And just thank everybody for all their efforts, and that I'm not the only one with some of these viewpoints. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the phone? You can hit *6 to unmute yourself. All right. Well, then we'll close the public comment period. I just have a few responses here. I mean, I guess first off, this ban on packaging is not a new concept. We've taken extensive public comment since we first proposed this months ago, and no one mentioned it. And so really, we were moving forward in a way that we thought was kind of the best way to do it. And we recognize that there is going to be some hardship in adjusting to this. We spent the first half of today's meeting discussing how you can get a waiver to this plastic prohibition. And it's not based on a percentage of the plastic. It's based on you demonstrating that you need a certain amount of plastic. And so
The waiver follows the product, not the person requesting the waiver.
that's right. Exactly. So once a waiver has been granted, that packaging can apply to anyone in the industry can use that packaging. Just a note that there's a bill that looks like it's moving. It certainly has cleared a very important hurdle that eliminates the need for child-resistant packaging for cannabis flower. And I know a lot of the plastic lids that people are talking about with child-resistant packaging are required because of that child resistance. However, if we eliminate that need for flower, then that in one kind of fell swoop eliminates a lot of the need for plastic in packaging of flower.
It also eliminates the opaque requirement for flower, and retailers in that bill can package.
Yeah. Essentially, those are the comments I had around plastics. And then just to kind of David's point about the yellow and black symbol, when we decided on our symbol, it was in looking at every other state at the time. The yellow and black symbol got voted on in the kind of waning days of us approving our regulations. It was just a few weeks ago. I did send the yellow and black symbol to the health department. They went through a very robust process of approving not only the health warning, but also the symbol. And they didn't have time to open that process in the kind of at the last minute. I do agree with the commenter that the yellow and black certainly seems like it's going to be the standard symbol in the United States and internationally. And we will very likely have to adopt it at some point, but we just didn't have, our agency partners didn't have the bandwidth to open their process on that symbol. But so at least for year one and in the immediate future, the white, red, and black symbol is the one that we're going to use. And I guess that's all the comments I had. Anything else come to mind in response to some of the comments that we've heard?
I would just reiterate that much of the discussion today centered around retailer-focused packaging to consumers. So in the situation where a cultivator wants to get their product ready to get within the supply chain to a retailer, these requirements do not apply unless you're a cultivator, like white labeling, doing your own packaging for that retail establishment and consumer use, then they would apply.
Right.
Just want to make that clear. I don't think CR package, I think Ben had mentioned something about CR requirements for bulk packaging, and I don't think that that's a necessity.
Right.
And to add, the packaging that cannot appeal to people under the age of 21 is a legislative charge. So we're trying to meet that legislative charge.
Yeah, I fully appreciate there's a lot of really good artists out there that can get creative with this, but as with a lot of things, we're trying to meet everybody in the middle. So we implore you to meet us there too.
Well, there's nothing left on the agenda, so we'll adjourn for today. Again, there is a social equity, economic empowerment networking event on Thursday, 5 to 7. That is a kind of open question and answer situation. And so, instead of kind of doing this dance that we do during public comment period, Bryn and David, our executive director and our general counsel, will be on the line answering people's questions directly. So great opportunity to kind of think about what's going on in the industry, kind of the direction that the board is heading, timelines, all of those kind of questions that you might have. So with that, I'll just adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for attending. Thanks, Kyle and Julie, and see you next week.
Thank you.